If a little green is good, more is even better. Now, back to Green is Good with John Shigarian and Mike Brady.
Welcome back to Green is Good, and we have our friend Greg Wittbecker on the phone today from Alcoa from beautiful Knoxville, Tennessee. Greg, welcome back to Green is Good.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be back and sharing the latest and greatest news on what's going on in recycling.
Well, first of all, I want to just say since we've spoken last on Green is Good, I wanted to say thank you very much for the invitation to come down to Knoxville, see your unbelievable operations, and when you were dedicating your new recycling can facility. I just want to say thank you. I was blown away. You guys just are amazing, and your DNA is all about recycling. So thank you for coming back to Green is Good to talk about all your new initiatives.
Happy to be here.
So, Greg, since we left you last, a couple of things. Mike and I have spoken on the air. You blew us away on some of your statistics and wow numbers last time. And, Mike and I still talk about and reference the whole energy issue. With what's happened recently in the Gulf and the complex energy crisis that we all face around the world, the wow numbers that you shared with us the last time, that when you recycle aluminum, as opposed to making it from virgin ore, there is approximately a 95% energy savings?
That's correct. And, we've been able to translate that into numbers that I think, the average person can relate to quite simply. The amount of electricity that you would save from recycling 1 ton of aluminum in any form would save enough electricity to allow the average American household to be operated for 15 months, John.
Oh my gosh!
That is the statistic, Greg. John,
right.
We've talked about it. I've quoted that to my friends, to my family, anybody that'll listen. That it says, well, 1 aluminum can. What's it mean? Well, I can tell you exactly what it means. You get enough of them to make a ton. Here's how much electricity and energy you will save. Okay. And again, every time, Greg, they go, "Are you kidding me? Really?" Yeah, really.
So, Greg, what we learned from you last time, I had never heard, and I'm in the recycling business, and I had never heard this term before, so I want you to share this with our listeners again, and then I want to go into a couple other topics. The issue of aluminum being an infinite recyclable. Can you explain that and then tie that into how that also ties into what you call a life cycle analysis of aluminum and how that plays together?
Well, one of the unique things about aluminum, and I do have to give credit to our friendly competitor, the steel industry, but all metals have a unique, physical structure that allows them to be recycled and rejuvenated back into essentially the same form and application they started with, John.
Right.
Which is somewhat unique compared to, let's say, plastic, which can be recycled, but it ends up going into a different application.
Right. And so aluminum then, like other metals, is called an infinite recyclable.
Yeah, we can basically take those aluminum cans, which we talked about before, that actually make a loop from the time that the consumer consumes them to the time that it's back on the shelf again in about 60 days.
Wow.
In 2 months, we can have that can back on the shelf in a complete loop. And we can do that basically over and over again because the can will go right back to an aluminum can over and over again.
So is that what you mean when you refer to the term of art that you've created called life cycle analysis of aluminum? Is that infinite recycling methodology also tie into life cycle analysis?
Well, it's definitely an integral part of life cycle analysis, and
okay.
and our listeners are going to hear more and more about life cycle analysis, or LCA, on a host of materials. The glass industry has recently announced some preliminary findings on their life cycle analysis, and the plastics industry is doing the same. It all ties into the sustainability movement and the fact that all manufacturers are looking at their material compositions and trying to choose those materials which give them, the most sustainable, manufacturing processes with green product.
Right.
So we commissioned a study in the aluminum industry 2 years ago, performed by a highly respected independent think tank called PE Americas, to study just the aluminum cans life cycle analysis, and it basically confirmed what we had suspected was happening over the last 10 years. There's been an enormous strides in terms of the energy efficiency of manufacturing aluminum, its recyclability, and the amount of greenhouse gases that are being saved by using these new, more energy efficient materials.
It makes so much sense as I'm listening to you speak, Greg, that, okay, we've got all this plastic, we've got all this aluminum, we've got all this steel, we've got all this glass. It's not like anybody's trying to get rid of it. Let's reuse it. Makes so much sense. It's already here. We've got it today. And the energy savings that we can realize by recycling. I mean, that's one of the 3 R's, which it's all about in the environmental movement, is reduce, reuse, and recycle. And here's a perfect reason why we should.
Well, I mean, just to give you a couple of statistics from that study, guys. Sure. I mean, since 1993, which was the last time that the aluminum industry did a life cycle analysis, the amount of greenhouse gases that we generate today in manufacturing those cans is 44% less than what it was 17 years ago.
Wow.
The typical aluminum can is 15% lighter than it was. I hate to disappoint our audience, but we haven't gotten stronger in our ability to crush those cans in our bare hands. Cans have gotten a lot thinner, unfortunately.
Oh, gee, and here we thought we were getting all buffed up.
That's great. Well, go on.
And we've also seen a 30% decrease in the amount of energy that's used just to manufacture aluminum cans. So, there have been some enormous improvements in the entire manufacturing process from the raw material all the way through to that end product.
Well, and I got to just share with our listeners, because of you and the opportunity to come down to Knoxville and see your operations and meet your great colleagues. I mean, from Claus Kleinfield on down, what a great group of people. And I'm going to tell you what, Greg, I mean, you guys, this is your DNA. Recycling is Alcoa's DNA. And I just want to share with our listeners here, after you get excited about listening to Greg today and hearing about all the great things that they're doing, Alcoa is doing in recycling, please go to their website, www.alcoarecycling.com. It has a tremendous wealth of knowledge with regards to what Alcoa is doing and what's going on in the recycling world. But Greg, I want to change subjects a little bit here. I want to talk a little bit about a couple different partnerships and joint ventures you have going that I've learned about because of you, like your joint venture with Novelis and Evermore Recycling. How is that going?
Well, thanks, John. That venture, which we started in August of 2009, was put together with Novelis with a single purpose, which is to buy used beverage containers in North America, and improve the supply chain efficiency by merging our combined volumes and getting economies of scale, and working direct with municipalities and commercial scrap suppliers to really make the recycling supply chain a lot more efficient. One of the problems that people have complained about for years in recycling is that it doesn't pay for all of these different materials? Well, part of that relates to the fact that, the supply chains had some inefficiencies in it in terms of, are we, maximizing our freight? And so we set up Evermore to really try to streamline what we do, at least in the aluminum side of the business. The other main objective we set out to do was to really, drive better quality, of the materials that we're collecting. As more and more communities across the country develop curbside collection programs, we really have to work closely with local entities on educating them as to, the quality of the material and the contaminants that can and cannot be accepted. And even other types of aluminum products that are recyclable that people just don't think about.
Right. So over the last course of the year, you're happy with the evolution of the partnership with Novellus and Evermore.
It's gone very well in terms of getting the operation up and running, and they've met with very broad acceptance in the marketplace, and people are always eager to have additional outlets for their material, and that's one of the wonderful things about aluminum recycling is it's traditionally been the leading contributor to the revenue streams for all recycling programs. So Evermore just enhances the attractiveness of recycling those cans.
So I want to now then use that as a segue in terms of enhancing recycling opportunities and go back to the word you just used, pay. Another great incentive program that I know you've partnered up with and done pilot programs with is our great friends from Recycle Bank, who Ron has been on our show, and Ron is a good friend and is one of those pioneers and visionaries. How is your pilot programs, Alcoa's pilot programs, going with Recycle Bank, and how's that evolution working? And tell us a little bit about what your thoughts are on the whole Recycle Bank Alcoa partnership.
Well, we've worked with them in a number of demonstration projects over the last year. Our first one was in Mesa, Arizona, a suburb of Phoenix. We subsequently moved on and worked in the city of Houston, in Philadelphia, the inner city, and most recently we've begun a program in suburban Houston in the town of Conroe.
Right.
Each of these programs was designed with a slightly different variation because we were trying to test different types of recycling. In Mesa, it was an existing community with curbside, but, the recycling rates had sort of plateaued. So we wanted to see if Recycle Bank's very innovative program would help to rejuvenate curbside. And it's worked fabulously well there. In Houston, they were starting with a relatively low baseline where they had very little curbside recycling going on there. And in Houston, it's been just astonishing. They had 140% increase in recycling volumes in the first 3 months in Houston's program.
Wow.
And the city was so happy that they've decided to roll it out to about 160,000 households.
Wow.
Philadelphia, they were experimenting with a high-density sort of block-type recycling program. And in Conroe, they're starting with a community that has literally no recycling, so they want to see how that is going. In the next 3 months, we're actually going to do another interesting pilot with Recycle Bank in Tempe, Arizona, at Arizona State University, where we're going to experiment for the first time with a Recycle Bank model going into multifamily housing, like condominiums for the students there. Because, multifamily has always been somewhat problematic in terms of how to figure out to make it easy for people in apartments and high-density housing. So overall, we're very, very pleased to be working with Ron's team and looking forward to even more exciting projects in the future with those guys.
And as a general social principle, as the green evolution takes hold, even though, Greg, I know you personally now, and I know this is your DNA, and what a great job you do at Alcoa, as does the whole team. But in terms of getting now the general community of the United States involved with more recycling, obviously more aluminum recycling, as you say, because it's led the way historically, but just generally more recycling in general, you believe the Recycle Bank model of incentivizing is a good model and will continue to grow.
I think it will. I mean, obviously it's still an early program when you look at it in the timeline of other recycling programs, but it certainly has shown tremendous promise in those communities where it's been developed. And of course, right in your backyard, guys, you've got Recycle Bank going big time in Los Angeles.
Yep. They just announced. I think it was right after we had seen each other in Knoxville. So you're right, and I understand from the Recycle Bank guys that's going well. We're going to have Ron back on to talk about that. Let's talk about some other things that our listeners touch on a daily basis. I remember the last time we had you on, Greg, we talked a little bit about cans and all the great things you do with Coke, and we'll leave that for another day. But we did talk about aluminum foil, and let's talk about not only aluminum foil today, but other aluminum type cans, aerosol, food, PET, and other things that people touch, our listeners touch. Talk about recycling those, and how do we get more of those back to your great company so they can be recycled instead of going to a landfill?
Well, I think it's a great point to touch on, John. I mean, frankly, a lot of people don't even realize that some of the typical products that they handle every day are even made out of aluminum. I know that for a long period of time, I didn't realize that a lot of your aerosol containers were, in fact, aluminum.
Right.
But a significant number of them are. Likewise, a substantial percentage of pet food cans, specifically cat food, are produced from all aluminum containers. And just like the aluminum can, those containers are infinitely recyclable, and it can be transformed right back into a product of comparable applications. So we're eager for consumers to recycle those products just as much as they recycle their aluminum cans. The difficulty is in many communities that, people just don't have a lot of familiarity with these products, and they say, well, gee, I don't think that's aluminum. You better just throw it in with the tin cans. They need to talk to their local recycling communities and say, look, we've got other aluminum that Alcoa and their partners want back, and we want you to make sure that you accept aerosols and pet food, provided that it's there. A few basic steps need to be taken. In the case of pet food, it obviously has to be rinsed and cleaned, and in the case of aerosols, the contents need to be emptied. But provided the consumer does those simple things, those products are eagerly sought after by the industry for recycling.
And you believe the future is more recycling of those kind of containers as more education happens of the public that these are made out of aluminum and they can be recycled.
Absolutely, it's just one more component of the waste stream that we can keep out of the landfills and reduce, our land. Being wasted on landfills.
Well, then let's talk about more how to reach the consumers. Let's talk a little bit about your great national bin grant program. How's that going? How is that going? And explain to our listeners what that really means.
Well, our program is now in its third year, John, and each year we've tried to progressively add more states and more communities. This year we will be distributing nationally about 50,000 22-gallon recycling bins, which are really designed typically for use in the individual home or in some institutional applications. We're now distributing those bins in, at last count, 26 different states. We go pretty much coast to coast, And, we've touched just an amazing array of different stakeholders, from individual schools to some really interesting opportunities we've had, recently with like the Navajo Indian tribe of Arizona is beginning to recycle. And so, every week we get more and more inquiries from people just eager to start recycling and wanting to know how to do it. And, it all starts with something just as basic as getting a container, filling it up, and then taking it to a convenient place to recycle it, whether it's a drop-off center or even a curbside program in your local neighborhood. So, the bin program has been going very well. Looking ahead to 2011, we're going to expand it again, even bigger, and eventually we'll probably be in every state in the country.
And that ties into, and we're down to the last 2 minutes or so, but I want you to share also about your concept of recycling carts and leasing them. How's that going, and what are you doing with that to help, again, reach more people?
Well, the concept behind carts is pretty simple. There's an enormous crying demand for curbside collection in this country. The problem is that most municipalities, of course, are suffering financial woes, and so what we've proposed to individual government entities is that Alcoa and its industry partners will actually purchase these carts and place those into those communities in exchange for receiving short-term commercial control over those recycled materials. After a period of time when we've received the recyclables and we've amortized out our initial investment, we then deed those carts over to the community. They've now got their carts and they've got a sustainable curbside program, going.
Has that rolled out yet in beta testing yet?
We're talking to a number of different communities around the country, and we're hoping to get something done on this program within the next few months. The good thing, John, is there's plenty of money out there to devote to this. There's a lot of investors that think this is a great place to put money right now.
Well, it seems as though as the trend of recycling increases in America and the interest level in it increases, Alcoa is going to continue to lead the way in aluminum recycling.
We're going to continue to try any and all innovative things that we can, and the one thing that I would leave the audience in is, we've set this goal of a 75% recycling rate by 2015, which seems like a really daunting task, but we've actually done the math and said if every man, woman, and child in this country would recycle one more can a week, we'd make our 75% goal immediately.
And Mike and I are smiling, and we love it. And Greg, the shows with you just fly by because Mike and I are just always amazed, as are our listeners, to all the great information you bring that's so darn practical that can get more solutions happening in the field with our listeners. So, Greg, we're just going to invite you back again later this year to give us more updates and more innovative practices that Alcoa is going to be implementing across the United States in the years to come. We just also want to ask our listeners to go check Alcoa's recycling website out. It's amazing. www.alcoarecycling.com. Greg Wittbecker, you are truly living proof that green is good.